Sports have always been a metaphor for war, and never has that been more clearly illustrated than the evolution from safe, soft balls to a sanitized backyard battlefield in just under 50 years. A slow-rolling revolution normalizing the idea that guns are toys, toys are business, and business is good. In the drive to soften the impact of conflict, they didn't just move the goalposts, they removed them altogether. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Nerf. Thank you to 80stees.com for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY to get 30% off your order today. 80stees.com started off as the source for t-shirts inspired by all things pop culture from the 1980s, but there's more to the 80s than just the 80s. They've got shirts inspired by the 70s, the decade that paved the way for the 80s. They've got shirts inspired by the 90s, the decade that carried on the legacy of the 80s. They've got shirts inspired by the 2000s, because the 80s isn't just a decade, it's a state of mind. Whether your interests are laser focused on one thing, say movies, there's plenty of choices from Jaws to Shaun of the Dead. If your interests bounce around, they've got shirts from cartoons to video games, superheroes to music and wrestling. From Transformers to Dungeons & Dragons, Gollum to Ron Burgundy, Darkwing Duck to Powerpuff Girls, from Pong to Street Fighter II. Their goal is to have something for everyone that loves retro pop culture. Whether your favorite cartoon is Jem and the Holograms or Robotech, or your favorite movie is The Karate Kid or 16 Candles, you'll find something you love. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order today. Again, that's code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order. Thanks again to 80stees.com. Nerf is a brand of toys designed around soft, pliable foam, facilitating safe indoor and outdoor play. Currently owned by Hasbro, they offer everything from balls to blasters to bow and arrows, baseball bats and boomerangs. Then multiply that by 2 because they make all that stuff for dogs as well. Ren Geyer was born in 1935. He graduated from Dartmouth College in scenic Hanover, New Hampshire in 1957 and promptly went to work at his father's new design firm. Armed with a degree in English, Geyer set aside his aspirations to be a writer and instead spent his days learning the ins and outs of the paper carton package design business. Seeking something more fulfilling, he looked into the possibility of starting his own business. While working on some concepts for a shoe polish client, he was struck by the idea of a large game mat, something kids could sit and play on, a game where the kids were the playing pieces and the mat was the game board. He raced to the art department and pulled out a giant piece of cardboard. He drew out a 6x4 pattern of 12-inch squares, wrangled some employees together, and hastily developed a game whereby each player had to try to traverse the game board as fast as possible. The only rule: no stepping on an occupied square. The result was fun, and if they were having that much fun, it was likely that others would as well. Together they developed a bunch of games that utilized floor mats and players as game pieces. One in particular they called Pretzel because players frequently found themselves tied up in knots reminiscent of the ubiquitous baked snacks. Geyer and the team sold Pretzel to Milton Bradley, one of the biggest game companies in the world, who then renamed it Twister after they found out the name Pretzel was already owned by a different company intended for a different product. As of this video, we could not determine if that competing product was the ubiquitous baked snacks. After a shaky start to its debut in 1966 and concerns about the immorality of all the incidental touching and bumping, Twister's sales exploded in 1967, revolutionizing what a board game could be, blazing new ground for what was considered acceptable social interaction. And encouraging Geyer to start his own toy and game development company called Windsor Concepts, Geyer and his team threw a lot of ideas at the wall. Few of them stuck, but it only takes one from hundreds to be the next big thing. One particular rough idea involved players attempting to hide money from each other underneath large rocks, while the other players try to steal the money, but they needed a way to stop the other players from stealing the money, so they cut up some pieces of packaging foam and threw it at each other. Is that a thing? While they continued to refine, hide the money under the rocks, and throw things at each other, a developer named Will Cruz bounced one of the foam projectiles over a net as one might do in a game of volleyball. Inspiration struck and they began to carve the foam into a ball shape they called a falsie ball, or muff ball.
Nice.
Geyer brought several different foam ball-based games to Milton Bradley, one of the biggest game companies in the world. Milton Bradley turned them away because Milton Bradley was a game company, and clearly Geyer and his team were shopping a toy concept. Disappointed but not deterred, they brought their foam ball game to Parker Brothers. Henry Simmons, head of new product development, said he liked the ball, but Geyer could keep everything else. Geyer didn't quite understand the angle, but accepted payment nonetheless. And in 1969, Parker Brothers put the simple 4-inch foam ball in a box, branded the world's first indoor ball, and called it Nerf. What is Nerf? Some say it's an acronym for non-expanding recreational foam, but those people are working way too hard. Looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, Nerf is quite simply a term borrowed from auto racing to describe the act of incidental touching and bumping between cars in a race. To make nerfing safer, racing teams traditionally installed bars around the vehicles to allow for safe, strategic touching and bumping from the side, from the back, intentional or unintentional. Those bars came to be known as Nerf bars and were associated with making a dangerous game safe. Where kids' play was previously potentially destructive, especially indoors, Parker Brothers' Nerf ball provided a solution. Kids could throw it, they could catch it, they could bounce it off the wall, and nothing would break. No one would get hurt.
Hey, let's play ball.
In the house?
Sure.
Hey, what are those things anyway?
They're Nerf balls. Spongy foam. That doesn't hurt anything.
Nerf balls.
You got your Nerf.
Hey, so where did you get these Nerf balls from, Mick?
From Kool-Aid, free. You send in the top of 20 packs of regular Kool-Aid or 10 packs of sugar-sweetened Kool-Aid to Kool-Aid, P.O. Box 600, Bradley, Illinois, and get a free Nerf ball.
A Nerf's a Nerf.
Assisted by a mail-in promotion with Kool-Aid and a television advertising campaign featuring teen music and television sensation The Monkees, Nerf went on to sell nearly 5 million units in its first year of production and kicked off the search for other products that could utilize foam in an effort to make play safer while retaining all the fun. Riding that sales high a year later in 1970, Parker Brothers introduced the Super Nerf Ball, a giant 7-inch competition-sized version of the regular Nerf ball that, and I'm quoting here, is made of soft foam so it's safer than most balls and it really can't hurt you, even if you catch a direct hit on the La Bonza. In 1971, Parker Brothers' Super Nerf Ball ran afoul of the Food and Drug Administration's Office of Product Safety. Initial tests suggested that Nerf's balls may be flammable, but they were not inflammable. But subsequent tests concluded that they were not inflammable, meaning that they were flammable and thereby in violation of the 1969 Toy Safety Act. Combustibility was never intended to be a feature of Nerf's balls. To maintain production, Parker Brothers worked to reformulate their foam to be less flammable, that is, non-flammable, guaranteeing that their balls would be, furthermore, free from inflammation. In 1971, John Maddox showed up on the doorstep of Minnesota Vikings place kicker Fred Cox. Maddox wanted to gauge Cox's interest in designing a new football-themed toy. Despite Cox's reservations about indulging a fan in such a manner, something about the game intrigued him. Maddox had designed a game that allowed kids to simulate kicking a field goal from various distances through an adjustable plastic goalpost. The distance between the kicker and the goalpost stays the same. The orientation of the uprights and the crossbar changes. When Cox asked what kind of ball Maddox intended to include, Maddox said he intended to use a heavier ball than normal so kids wouldn't be kicking it out of the yard every time. Cox suggested the opposite, a lighter foam rubber ball to prevent kids from getting hurt. They reached out to a plastics company in Minnetonka, Minnesota, who were able to construct a prototype football a quarter of the size of an official football. After being turned down by a few toy companies, they landed at Parker Brothers, who immediately purchased the rights to the foam rubber football and rolled it out as part of the Nerf line of toys in 1972 alongside the Nerf Hoop indoor basketball game. The early 80s saw the introduction of the Nerf Boomerang, the Nerf Baseball, Nerf Soccer Ball, and their new marketing campaign, Nerfin' USA. They continued to expand Nerf into a variety of indoor and outdoor gaming experiences: Nerf Billiards, Nerf Ping Pong, Nerf Golf. In 1985, Parker Brothers merged with Kenner to create Kenner Parker Toys. In 1986, they introduced Nerfles, a line of modular toys which at their core featured a vinyl ball that could be played with independent of the various costumes and accessories. Little creatures from the planet Earth. Nerfles are your friends who keep the good times rolling. In 1987, Kenner Parker Toys was purchased by Tonka. 2 years later, Nerf formally began combat training with the Blast-A-Ball, the shoot 'em, dodge 'em, catch 'em game. Blast-A-Ball featured two blasters, essentially large plastic tubes that, when pumped, expelled small, safe, high-visibility balls up to 30 feet. More players could be added to the game with the addition of more blasters. Instructions cautioned kids not to use the blasters in a manner not explicitly intended by the manufacturer. It's not a bat, it's not a sword, you shouldn't swing it, it's not meant to be used with any other kinds of balls or projectiles. Never aim it at another player's head, pets, or young children. Shoot balls, but do not shoot them at balls. In 1991, Tonka, including Kenner Parker Toys, was purchased by Hasbro till all are one, and Combat evolved to include the new Nerf bow and arrow with foam arrows that flew up to 35 feet. Meanwhile, Laramie Toys was quickly building a wetworks empire as they introduced the Super Soaker in 1991. Invented by aerospace engineer Lonnie Johnson, the Super Soaker made nearly $200 million in its first year, redefined how a gun could look and how far it could squirt. The following year, in 1992, Hasbro released the Sharpshooter, the blaster that set the standard for a new age of soft combat. A compact weapon, roughly the size and shape of a real sidearm that fired smaller, suction cup-tipped darts instead of balls. Over at Laramie, the Super Soaker business was so good that it caught the all-seeing eye of Hasbro, who in 1995 purchased them, assimilating their essence, Hasbro till all are one. Hasbro continued to evolve their Nerf blaster offerings alongside Super Soakers. With Super Soaker inventor Lonnie Johnson's help, they were able to modify some of the components used to propel water instead to propel Nerf darts. In 1998, Hasbro established a monopoly on compassionate combat when they purchased Tiger Electronics, adding laser tag to their arsenal, whether by foam projectiles, pressurized water, or light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Hasbro till all our guns. In 2002, Hasbro shut down Laramie as a brand while they continued to produce Super Soakers. In 2004, they launched the N-Strike Blaster, which featured 3 blasters that could be fired simultaneously or taken apart and fired individually. The culmination of all of Nerf's various weapons, it is the fever dream of a 9-year-old brought to life. In 2010, Super Soaker and Nerf merged, and Hasbro started clamping down on all the copycats infringing on their turf. They sued Lannard Toys and Buzzbee Toys for producing products that were a little too close to Super Soakers and Nerf blasters. The court sided with Hasbro, preventing both companies from dabbling in backyard battles so transparently. By 2011, Nerf was synonymous with toy guns instead of safe, soft sports. Universities around the world actively hosted massive multiplayer IRL games like Humans vs. Zombies that could span days and weeks at a time. Nerf blasters became the weapon of choice for their portability, range, rate of fire, and conspicuousness. In 2013, Lonnie Johnson sued Hasbro for underpaid royalties on both Super Soaker and Nerf branded products. This time the court was against Hasbro. Johnson was awarded $73 million out of what Hasbro estimated were sales of only like $1 billion. In its 6th decade of sales, Nerf's impact can be seen far beyond physical products. The term nerfed is synonymous with reduced effectiveness in the gaming community, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. And just this year in 2023, Hasbro introduced the Nerf Elite Junior, the first ever blaster designed for kids as young as 6, a blistering indictment of America's obsession with guns. Sorry, blasters. Today, Nerf is one of Hasbro's core brands alongside Marvel, Transformers, Star Wars, My Little Pony, Magic the Gathering, Dungeons & Dragons, Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, and Peppa Pig. At one point, Nerf was all about being able to kick some balls in the living room. Today, it's all about muzzle velocity, range, and rate of fire. Nerf is about the normalization of firearms and the pursuit of corporate profits, because when it comes to guns as toys, it's Nerf or nothing. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, if you would like early access to the videos ad-free, as well as behind-the-scenes features, sneak peeks at upcoming projects, and exclusive monthly podcast about the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy and let us know in the comments down below if you like kicking balls or shooting balls. What is your favorite method of simulated combat? I had that bow and arrow as a kid and I loved that thing. I stalked our poor cat all around the house with my shirt off like I was John James Rambo. Don't worry, I never shot the cat. It was all about the drama of the narrative. I was hired to do a job, but when it came time to execute, I couldn't go through with it because I knew that's exactly what the people at the highest levels of government wanted, and there's no way that could be the right thing to do. No, the mission objective had changed. I was going rogue. Time to save the cat, extract him from the scene before following the money back to the source and taking out the person who hired me to do the job. 3 arrows were all I needed. 1 for Nico the cat, 1 for the country they asked me to betray, and 1 for me. I was a very dramatic 10-year-old.
Jesus. Cut.